Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us at Startup Boston. This is our 5th year. We're really excited about it. And Startup Boston got started by one of our key organizers, Stephanie Rulick, who wanted to have a community for us to learn and get to know each other and to be part of something bigger, as well as the companies that we were starting and working at. And so as part of that, we want to make sure you're in the right session. This is Dive or Wade. It's part of the Startup Curious track. If it turns out that you wound up in the wrong session, just go up to the top, click on Agenda, and you can find your right session. And before I turn it over to our moderator, I'm going to handle a couple of logistics, which are actually very quick. So there's a chat for the session and for the public. And the public one means anybody who's at Startup Boston, not just in this session. Please ask questions, right? The panel is here to help as part of education and community. And so really be part of this, be active with us, and do that through the Q&A. And then I just got a note like 2 seconds ago about a new little contest that we're running. So pardon me while I read this off my phone because we just saw it. Okay, here's the competition. You'll want to pay attention to everything that we're saying, which I'm sure you are going to do anyway. But if you post a quote on social media from here or any of the sessions you attend, and you use the hashtag SBW2021, you'll be entered to win one of $500 gift cards to a Black-owned Boston business. So that's pretty exciting. And with that, I am going to turn over to our moderator, Russell Harder, and he's going to introduce himself, and then we're going to chat with our speakers. Thanks, Russell. Thanks, everybody.
Awesome. Well, hello, guys. So I am Russell Harder. I will be moderating this discussion. For me, I'm a student at RPI, I'm a dual major in CS and information technologies and web science. I'm really excited to be here because these kind of questions I've been asking myself. After college, what am I going to be doing with where in the job market will I land? So this is really relevant to me, and I'm really excited to be here. And then I'd like my panelists, Colleen, Vishal, Winston, and Sam, introduce themselves.
Sure. Yeah. Happy to go first. Hey, I'm Vishal. I'm CEO, co-founder of Link Squares. We're reading contracts with algorithms, and we're having a great time. Maybe I'll hand off to Sam. Hey, Sam.
Hi. Good morning. My name's Sam. I'm running a stealth mode startup in the Bitcoin space.
Go ahead, Colleen.
Okay, cool. I'm Colleen Hayes, and I'm the founder and CEO of Present. Our mission is to provide well-being for all, and we take the guesswork out of employee well-being programming. Winston.
Thank you. And I'm Winston Daly, founder of GoGo. So GoGo is a digital hiring platform and online community for educators of color, with the goal of making it easier to get a more diverse group of educators in our classroom and increasing the pipeline of future education.
Awesome. Yes, a wonderful, wonderful group we have here. Can we start the poll real quick? And so if anyone's here can answer the poll, you can kind of get a gauge on the audience. If you guys can see over on your right, there should be a little red dot next to poll to the right of chat. And we'll give that about 30 seconds, more or less. All right, so we have a very good spread here. Looks like we got about 23% looking toward the future, 30% actively searching, 30% have a job now and debating, and 15% banning startups is looking for more information. So we have everyone here, which is wonderful. We love that. So let's just get into the questions. So first one, how do you guys choose between a startup and a big company? What kind of decisions and things do you need to know about the startup to evaluate before you make that decision? And I think, Sam, you were talking about this.
Yeah, sure. So I think it depends on a couple things. One is where you are in your journey, as well as your risk tolerance. So we can only speak from our own sort of myopic experiences, but my own journey was running my own agency, then working at a very well-funded startup, then working at one of the biggest companies in the world, and now back to my own venture-backed startup. The benefits of working in a big company are pretty big. It's the wealth of resources you have at hand. It's all the expertise that you can tap into as well, and also a lot of doors open up to you as well, depending on the company that you're in, because there's that legitimizing factor, right? So I think it's incredibly beneficial. There's kind of the obvious sort of things that are cons. There's the bureaucracy and then the overhead that you have to deal with as well, that are all just part and parcel of being at a big company. Big legal departments and things that you have to make sure are curated before you take things public. But the flexibility and the just the access and the availability of different things that you have at hand is incredibly useful. It was incredibly useful for me. I think at a startup, the thing I was missing, the thing that kept itching at me when I was working at a big company was the baseline anxiety that you have in a startup. And I missed that for some reason. Working at a big company, you have all the benefits and you have all the pay. Things are relatively stable for the most part, but that stability kept me at equilibrium, and which kind of felt like death. It was just I needed to be at real bodily harm. Is kind of how I put it to myself, which is what a startup offers. So I kind of relate doing a startup to being an explorer or like a merchant back in like the 15th century or something. These people basically convinced rich nobility and royalty to give them money to go on these crazy expeditions, with the sort of understanding that you may well just not come back, physically may well not come back. There's the inclement weather, changing tides. There's hostile natives, mutiny. There's a bunch of things that can go wrong along the way. So it's incredibly risky. But these people who fund you have some sort of confidence in you that you actually can perform the way you expect to perform. So yeah, I think it comes down to your risk tolerance. I have lots of friends who work in big companies and want to go into the startup world, but they have families or kids and other things that just restrict them really from being as risk loving as they may have been otherwise. I decided to kind of delay that a little bit longer. Not to say that that's a factor that inhibits you to go into a startup or not, but you have to look at your own profile and also where you're at in your life.
Yeah. I'm happy to.
Awesome. Thank you, Sam.
I'm happy to follow up.
That is a great question that we will hopefully.
I was happy to follow up behind Sam and say that you get to do different things at smaller companies, right? You get to wear lots of hats, and it can be a real diverse and awesome experience. Big companies they just move slower, right? And so definitely the challenge of the environment is pretty fun. But yeah, I call it personal cash flow burn rate. Definitely comes into a factor, right? Like, can you afford to take a journey in a 5-person company, depending on kind of what your expenses are and things you need to live on, right? It's a harder decision, but small companies are tons of fun, right? You get to feel the energy, you get to feel like you're building something. So.
Awesome, yeah. And I was just going to say, Hakeem, great question. We'll hopefully get to that later. And so another question we have here: what did you consider when deciding whether to start something full time or do something part time? And I know, Colleen, you have a lot of experience in this.
Yeah, of course. I think this is a really important question to consider because not enough people talk about what that risk means that Sam brought up, right? So, healthcare and benefits, it was a huge consideration for me because, I had a friend the other day who's a full time founder who chipped a tooth eating an oyster out to dinner and then had to go and pay $1,000 to get that tooth fixed right out of his pocket. So, a lot of these things, that can happen both big and small to our physical health, our mental health, our emotional health, they require funding, right? So, healthcare and benefits is a huge thing to consider. Do you have a partner that you could possibly get benefits from, a parent if you're under the age of 26, or some other way to get that affordable healthcare? It's a huge luxury to work at a big company and have some really solid healthcare and benefits. So something important to consider. I also think when deciding to start full time or do it as a side hustle, it's important to think about how your company is going to get started, right? So I bootstrapped Presence and put in my own capital that I was earning in real time from my sales career. And I feel really fortunate and lucky to have done that. But the harder I worked at my full time gig, the more I was able to put money into the growth of my company. So having that privilege was something I will never ever forget, and I feel really fortunate to have made that decision to keep going with both, so that the company and my product could get launched. And then finally, I come from a family where my education was on my shoulders to pay for, and everything since I was about 11 years old that I wanted, I had to pay for it myself. So we all have personal financial goals. We want to buy homes, cars, things like that, and be able to have a lifestyle that feels safe. So being able to align your daily activities with a budget that supports all of those things is something else that's really important to consider. If you can make that leap and go full time and you have all these things lined up, that's amazing and that's so incredible. But a lot of founders have to go that doing both route for a year, 2 years, even 5 years, depending on your company and the trajectory of your business. So I fully support people doing both, but these are just some of the things that I personally considered in order to be able to thrive as a single person who is a founder of a wellness startup. So I know these are not decisions to be made lightly.
Awesome. Yeah. I actually have a follow-up question from the Q&A. If you don't mind, with time-wise, how does going into a part-time startup, how do you manage that time-wise if you have both a part-time job and your almost main job?
Yeah, I think setting expectations with whatever the primary job is, right? So if you are being employed by another company, making sure you understand what is expected of you there is really important. And then aligning your schedule and your habits to support that. So there's a lot of sacrifice that really needs to be made within that initial point of getting your company started. So you might have to spend almost all of your time working or sleeping and eating, just doing the basic things to survive, rather than having a social life and having a lot of time with family. It really just depends on what you are working with your primary job and your side hustle gig. So prioritizing your time is very difficult. But know that some sacrifice has to be made. I heard some really good advice from Greg Renfrew, who is the founder of Beauty Counter. And she said, you can have it all, but not all at once. So I try and keep that as my mantra, knowing that maybe the relationship is the priority, or, a ton of time with my family isn't the priority, or a ton of time with my friends isn't the priority. And maybe work and sleep where the priority is for a couple of months, and then I add in a bit more of those other things whenever I can. So just be kind to yourself, be gentle with yourself, and do the things that you need to sustain your mental and physical health first and foremost, and then show up for your loved ones. If you're a parent, if you're a partner, an auntie like I am, as well as you can, and give yourself some grace.
Awesome. Thank you. And then kind of changing pace in this a little bit. So people can join startups at different times. For example, after college, after grad school, after a lot of experience at a big company. What are some advantages and disadvantages to all these different times where you could take that plunge? Like Winston, you had a lot of thoughts on this.
Yeah, the different times. I think we've heard a lot being said by Sam and Colleen just about risk. I think at an earlier age, either in college as an internship or coming out of undergrad, you're more likely to be less risk averse. Being willing to jump into a startup with not a lot of money on the table, either as a salary or even the potential, but it is something that is important to you and a place where you can find a drive. I think also that's about your community. At that age, you're also more likely to have people around you that are also less risk averse and really ready to go out and make their mark in the world. For me, I started this after leaving a career in a completely different industry. And what I have is I may be surrounded less by people who are willing to take risks, because now you have your mortgage, your kids in school, you have a spouse, and it's not just a decision only for you to make as a young person. This is something that's being more collaborative. But at an older age, I have much more experience and knowledge of industry, knowledge about building a company, having seen things in companies that I did and did not like, and how do I structure that? Because when you're going into a startup, if you're as the founder as we are, you're not only building a company and a mission, you're building a culture, and you're now responsible for those same people who you're helping to feed, who are going to work for you, and their work and life experience. So having that experience yourself and understanding how to structure a company for those in the future is certainly a great asset of being a little further along in your career. But I will say this, the energy of being a young person and even being, for lack of a better word, a little ignorant and not knowing what you don't know and being able to jump just 10 toes in is incredible. And there's nothing like it. And you're also able to fail very quickly. If it doesn't work out in your 20s, you get more bites at that apple as you move into the startup world.
Awesome, thank you. Wonderful insight. And in the same kind of vein, what things should we know about like ourselves? You mentioned that we can't be a generalist. So like, what's kind of your personal superpower that you can bring to the table at a startup? And I know Vishal, you had mentioned this.
Yeah, sure. When the companies are small, at least when Link Squares was small and we were getting on with our journey, I mean, it's really around hiring experts as much as we could, right? The balance between, who do we have to teach how to do some role in the company, whether that's engineering or sales or marketing, right? And I think as you're evaluating a company on different journeys, like journeying like a 5-person company has a different level of stress and pressure than say joining like, I'd even consider like 100-person company still like a startup, right? I think Link Squares now is like maybe 150 people. I still consider us to be a startup, but we're not really anymore. But what I've noticed along the way is the best talent that we had and came in at all different phases, whether they were very seasoned or a couple of years out of school, they could bring something really tangible to the table where they could like raise their hand and like take ownership of something. And I think as you're evaluating, like you want to join a smaller company, that's part of kind of like your own personal pitch to the CEO or the founders of the company that says, I am the best content marketer. Like that's what I do. Like I love writing blog posts and creating amazing ebooks and helping the buyer's journey at all parts of the funnel, right? And that's part of like your personal pitch about why, right? As a founder, as a CEO, we're always trading, are we making investments or are we spending our money wisely to get the outcomes that we desire, right? And so the more that you know about yourself, the more traction you'll get with companies at all different phases. You're well researched on what you can do to help. I mean, that's ultimately the goal, right? Like, I'm sure Colleen and Sam would say the same thing as you're evaluating, and Winston would say the same thing as you're evaluating talent, right? You're trying to figure out, I got problems, we got holes we're trying to fill. Who can fill these holes, right? Like it's like plate spinning. Like I can't spin 65 plates anymore. It's too big. We need another 5 plate spinners to take another 5 plates from me or someone else. So Colleen's nodding her head. What do you say, Colleen?
Well, you just made me think of something I said recently to our chief product officer. I said, I need to stop doing things I'm not good at, that
Totally.
I'm forced to do, right? So there's different things that as a founder, you're just required to do all the time. And
Yeah.
a lot of them can be really painful, especially if you don't have the skills to do them. Thankfully, Google is a wonderful resource where you can pretty much learn how to do anything, but that resonates completely with me and just made me laugh a little bit thinking about that.
Yeah, for sure. We talk about it inside the company, like we should all be giving up the things we don't like to do and we're not good at, right? We should always, if you have the luxury of having, cash to be used to hire folks, then like my job and the job of the people that work for me directly is to like give up the things they're not good at and they don't want to do. And then hire people who actually like the things that you're not good at. They're actually good at them and they like to do those. And then it's like a win-win, right? So think about that, right? Along the journey, it's like, how can you help a company take one of these responsibility areas and contribute to it? Because leaving me to the income statement or the, cash flow statement is a terrible idea, right? I know that already. So like we hired like a fractional CFO like immediately just to help us even raise capital and things like that. Anyone else have any other thoughts?
Yeah, I'm gonna go on the other side. I'm gonna stand up for my generalist. Generalist is kind of a little bit of a trigger word for me because I remember when I was in grad school, I didn't get this internship because at a startup, and the gentleman said, "Well, we can't really have a generalist." And I was like, it can't be a negative that I know a lot about a bunch of different subjects, right? So I think you should know everything of something, but a little something about everything, especially in the startup space, because you may be called on to work in some different areas. You may not be the marketer forever, but there may be a day where we need you to get in there and help us with the marketing strategy and be willing to sort of shift across all brands and all of the genres that are going to be within your company. So I think I need experts, just like I especially technical. You need your CTO, you need your CFO. I'm not going to have everyone running our books, but it is great when you have a company that is, and people who are curious and knowledgeable about a great number of subject matters.
I like that a lot.
I'll jump on what Winston said really quick. It's kind of a trigger word for me too. I've been called a jack of all trades but a master of none, and that really hurt. But I think it's just a stage at where you're at. In the beginning, you have to wear a bunch of different hats. As you grow, hopefully you bring in experts and you bring in people that are actually good at those things. But I think it depends on the stage at where you and your startup are at, for sure.
Awesome, wonderful discussion there. And in a very similar vein, what questions should people ask about their personal lives or personal needs before deciding on which way that they go? And I know, Colleen, you mentioned this earlier in one of your earlier questions. You want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, of course. I know we have a ton to get through, so I'll be really brief here. It's okay to be a little bit selfish. So I'd say, ask yourself, what do you want to achieve financially? And what are your objectives? I'd also say, what is being asked of you, your family? What is being asked of you of your family at the moment? So I personally, my mom died when I was 26. So throughout that whole time, there was no way I could have been running a startup, right? I was at the hospital, staying over with her, providing care at home, and acting as a caregiver alongside my siblings and my dad. So there are just points in life where you're giving so much of yourself that you can't give to a company and your team in a way that feels fair to them. So what is being asked of you, of your family, is a really important question. Another question, I'd say, can you receive financial support from someone else in your life while you're getting started with your startup? Unfortunately, as a single person, this wasn't an option for me. So staying that Wade route was really the best option. And then finally, do you have enough saved to support yourself should something go wrong? Because you never want to find yourself completely depleted of cash and unable to live. So if you can have some kind of reserve tucked away in different accounts, saved for yourself, whether it's in Fidelity or your savings account, just try and be really smart about tucking away as much as you can, maybe making an auto transfer every single month, especially if you're a little bit younger and earlier in your career. It's so important to be saving as much as you can. I was not taught to save as a young person, so I had to teach myself that as a young adult. And yeah, these are some things I just personally considered and hope they help other folks.
Awesome. Let's see. And then, so how should you prepare yourself to join a company if you've had, very little training or very little processes in mind? And know Sam, you had something to say about this.
Yeah. Don't ask for permission, just generally. I was told by a good friend of mine that it's better to act and ask for forgiveness later. One thing I've learned as I've gone through my journey is no one knows what's going on, and I mean that in the most general sense. If you have some sort of gut feeling, and you should usually listen to your gut more often than not, you should probably go at it. I think this, joining a company is a bit different because you probably do have to show some sort of like confidence. But in terms of learning things, I started in a software development agency. I have no computer science background. I'm self-taught, and the people that I worked with were also self-taught. But we didn't ask for permission. We just started. So different factors go into that, and you may have to have the luxury of being able to do that. But yeah, this idea of experts and expertise, I think, is way overblown. Everyone is a human, from the president to the smallest foot soldier. It's a matter of your own willingness to go and learn and take things into your own hands.
Yeah, Sam, I think to that point, some of the starting is just getting
Awesome,
in.
Thank you.
Just how do you get into the startup space? And then once you're there, just grabbing as much as you can and soaking up and being as engaged as Sam said. You don't ask permission, you jump in, say, can I help here? Or you jump in, you see where the weaknesses are in the company, you see where your value is added. I always say that no one really knows how to do their job until they're doing it. Like in any interview setting or when we're coming in, we're all kind of making it up a little bit, but once you're in the company, that's really where you prove yourself. So once you get your foot in the door, you kick it wide open.
Yeah, and I often notice the best talent surprises you just with their willingness to want to do more and help, right? Constantly raising their hand to say, yeah, I can take a spin at this, or I'm happy to do the first draft, or let me take an action. I'll go follow up with someone, right? And like that's the sort of kind of motor that needs to be running inside, right? And when we evaluate talent in our company, it's easy to see the folks that are real self-starters they're still raising their hand, even though we're like, okay, maybe not, we can get someone else to do it. And I love those moments. And those have been critical even on my own startup journey, to be a person that's just constantly raising their hand and saying like, I'll take a spin at it. I don't know, whatever. It may not be the greatest, but I'll do it, right? That sort of attitude definitely goes really far in all kind of aspects of work generally, but definitely in startups.
Awesome. Yeah. So perfect, guys. We are a little bit in front of the halfway point, so doing great in time. And I think it's a good time for a quick poll, a second poll, final poll. I was wondering, how much do you guys know about kind of startups and the startup lifestyle? If you could set up a poll, thank you. And while this poll is going, I just a couple of really great questions in the Q&A, some of which we will actually get to later. So don't feel bad if the question hasn't been answered yet. There's a good chance that we will get to it later.
I'm happy to take Cliff's question while we go through the poll. That's good.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. So Cliff, I feel really lucky because HubSpot is very entrepreneurial. So it's not uncommon for people to have a side gig of some kind, whether it's teaching yoga. My friend Boards by Mo, if you all are in the Boston area, check it out. She makes charcuterie boards and has grown to like 55,000 followers in a matter of a handful of months on Instagram. She's doing amazing revenue-wise and is absolutely crushing it. So HubSpot is definitely a company that's very supportive of having something else going on in your life. So if you can try and find a company that has that mindset, that's amazing. I'd also say to be really open and communicative, because if you're hiding something, it creates bad energy between you and your employer. So being really open about certain milestones or things you're celebrating is a great idea. So you can have that openness, and the door is there for you to open whenever you need to have the conversations that might be a little bit more challenging. So that's my advice and my thoughts on that.
Russell, could I take two of Hakeem's questions that I see here? I can just answer those real quickly.
Yeah.
So Hakeem, first, I started at GoGo mainly as a parent. I left my career in finance about 5 years ago because I wanted to go back and give back to my community. So I started working in the community with kids, particularly through sports, and then through in the education space. So I wanted to build something to make it easier for teachers of color because my daughter did not see a lot of herself in her educators. So it was tough for her and her friends, and also my friends and parents around me. So it's really hard for schools to connect. It's harder for teachers to connect and network and build the pipeline and really change the view of education. So I thought I could go out there and build a better mousetrap. So that's what I've been doing for the past year or so. The other part, how do you deal with isolation as a minority founder? I can't sugarcoat it. It is incredibly hard. Building in the last year has been really isolating. You feel very siloed. You feel very alone. There are not a lot of people that you can share with. But what I did was I put myself out there and found every accelerator, space, any possible place that I could find other founders and immediately start talking to them. And the more you put yourself out there and network and make it and just be very honest with yourself, like, hey, I'm not doing well. I'm having a tough time. It is hard to fundraise. It is hard to build. It is hard to wear every hat, and understand that other founders in your space feel that exact same way. You just have to get out there and find them. And if you can connect with me, I can certainly put you in a space where you can find folks that you can talk to and folks that you can build with. But it is incredibly difficult.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about, being a minority founder also. It's really up to you in the sense of, like, raising capital is hard. It's hard for everyone, but the playbook that I've always thought about is building a company that's really undeniable, right? I'm a first timer too. I've never gone and built 7 unicorns and taken them all public. I'm a nobody. I didn't go to MIT. I didn't go to Harvard. Like, I don't have any of the advantages that other folks could have. So the strategy I've really always prioritized on is we're going to prioritize the revenue chart, and it's going to look up and to the right, and it's going to look really, really hot. And although it may not be everyone's cup of tea what we're doing, it's going to be undeniable that we are doing a great job. And we're going to spend all of our time and focus telling that story of how great of a job we're doing, and let our performance speak. Because at the end of the day, we really don't have anything else, right? In the early days, raising capital is all about, is it Vishal? Is it the founding team? Are they smart enough? Will they work hard enough? Are they motivated enough? But then as you get later in the journey, it's all about the spreadsheets, really what the spreadsheets say you are, and how well your business is performing. So I've always told the company, it's going to be our performance that enables us to hire more people. It's going to be our performance that gets us a bigger office, or it's our performance that's going to enable us to start paying market rates. And that's the key to helping me do my job, which as CEO is to raise capital, right? That's one of my jobs I can't give to anyone else. So, and then just building as big of a network as you can, constantly finding another CEO of a company that's further ahead, and asking them what they know about the future. It's almost like looking at yourself in the future, and seek out folks that can pull you with them. Everyone needs some sort of break in their life to make this journey happen, right? Whether that's the first person who believed in your company and gave you your first term sheet, right? And I have that person for me, but then you need a lot of other people too. Like I find that, informally, I made like a CEO peer group. I just found other CEOs who were in the journey, met them at startup networking events, and we started going out and having a beer and chatting through the issues of hiring and scaling and fundraising and finding little communities. There's so many of them. There's so many of them on Facebook too, like SaaS communities or startup communities. Just like, how do you find like-minded people to share stories? But it's really on you, your motor, to go out and seek those opportunities. It becomes really really handy. And I'm happy to connect with anyone. And that's one of the ways I give back to be generous with my time. A lot of people help me on my journey. I have to do the same. You'll find a lot of people that are like this.
Yeah, to that point, Vishal, I'll say, find the validation, particularly for minority founders. Find the validation in building your company. It's you can see the articles about this person went out and got funding and got this funding, and it seems that should be your goal. Your goal is to build a great company for the people that you want to serve and the customer base that you want to hit, and finding the validation in that and realizing that at the end of the day is what you're building towards. You may go 2 years without finding the correct funder who actually understands and is a benefit to your company. But if you're building your company, serving the people you want to serve, providing the product you want to provide, and working for your employees, find the validation in that.
Yeah, you only need one true believer, right?
Yeah.
You need one true believer. You got to turn over a lot of stones with the right motivation to keep turning stones over to find that one true believer and not give up. A lot of the startup journey is not giving up.
Yeah.
Awesome. I love that. Really, really awesome words of wisdom here. And then kind of keeping with the from the ownership idea, how do you guys view like side hustles for your employees? Is that like evidence of grit, or is that someone who isn't committed to their day job? And I know Vishal had something to say about this.
I think it's awesome. I think when people are doing things on the side and using their brain power and their free time to explore different things, it's really inspiring, right? It's really awesome to see folks even ask questions about like how did you get started in the company and what sort of things were you doing? And I'm really quite open with our employees, right? Whether you stay with us for 6 months or a year, or 3 years, 10 years, all the way to the end, or whatever the journey is, like hopefully you spent some awesome time learning stuff. But yeah, I love it. I love when people have a little entrepreneurial motor and have that part. It's also like a lot of the great talent we've had in the company have tried to do things like e-commerce startups, or one of my employees who's now like my SVP of product. He had an online guitar e-commerce company where he would like fabricate guitars that look like Fender Strats and piece them together, and he took that thing, I don't know, to more than $1 million in revenue, and that journey came to an end. But it tells you a lot about a person, right? It tells you a lot about their kind of internal grit, right? And what they're able to get through to do stuff like that, even though maybe it wasn't the journey they wanted it to be. They learned a lot, and that's all kind of like net positive in my perspective. Colleen's nodding her head, came off mute.
Yeah, I think curiosity is one of the most important qualities that someone can have working at a startup, and having your own side gig shows you're curious about making some part of an industry better. And it also shows you're curious about how expansive your own life can be, and you're willing to dedicate that time to it. So all the curiosity is welcomed on our team, and we're definitely a fan of people doing their own things as well. Totally agree with everything Vishal said.
I hear a lot of agreeing. Anyone, Sam, Winston, do you guys disagree, or do you guys, or would you say about the same things?
I'm at a different place. It's only two of us right now, so we're both fully just on this.
Okay.
So I'm kind of speculating a little bit, but I think, yeah, I don't know. It's not from experience, but I think as long as it doesn't get in the way of the work that you're doing for the company, because that is the most important thing. We have a mission statement to like actualize. Then it's fine. But yeah, I think, just echoing what both Colleen and Vishal said, I think the creativity and the creative juices definitely help. In the agency that I ran, it was different because it was an agency model. But yeah, I think about half the company were doing different things on their own time. It wasn't affecting the work that they were doing for the company. But that I could see that sort of seeping into the work they were doing for us, and it was beneficial in that example. So I would say it depends.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Sam. It really depends on one, your role in the company and what that side hustle is, but certainly would never step in the way of anyone having outside interests, because you're going to need people to be able to have places to decompress and maybe step away for a little bit.
Awesome, yeah, and this kind of links in a little bit with a question we had from the Q&A is, as a founder, we need to know about many things. Are there any tips to understand how much is enough and what to prioritize, what you should learn?
I personally felt really overwhelmed by this challenge starting in the startup community because I felt there were so many people I met that knew so much about so many topics. And joining the startup world is like learning a new language because you have to learn to speak the way investors speak, think the way investors think about all your different key stakeholders, find mentors. I think focusing on one thing at a time is really important. Our brains cannot focus on more than one thing at a time. So if you can pick one task you're looking to do better, one habit you're looking to pick up, one thing you're looking to learn about. For example, right now I'm learning all about breath work because we're a well-being company. Breath is such an important part of mindfulness and meditation. So I'm reading the book Breath. And that is the thing I'm focused on. If I pick up another book, I'm not going to beat myself over the head, but just try focusing on one skill at a time and allow yourself to absorb as much as you can from conversations with your peers. I highly recommend, especially for underserved populations who are founders, creating a community is really important because you learn so much from your fellow founders that you connect with. I have an incredible group of female founders in Boston that we created ourselves just through, going for coffee walks and meeting through introductions from our mutual investors. So surrounding yourself with really smart people that you can call at any time for advice, ask the dumb questions to, because Google can only take you so far sometimes, and sometimes you need some real-time feedback from someone who has a bit more knowledge than you do.
Yeah, I also think the finance part will sneak up and surprise you how complicated it is. And anytime you're engaging with like venture capitalist type investors, a lot of the discussion is around like your out years model and your cash efficiency, and that's a skill that you have to learn some basic proficiency in, right? Like can you project out what your expense structure is going to be next year? Well, that means you need to understand like who you're going to hire, how much you're going to pay them, when do you need them, right? Like some of like kind of like I call it financial literacy of being a founder. A lot of it is well published on the internet, right? But like that is like a really critical piece. I mean, essentially, venture capitalists, they borrow money from other people, right? They're called limited partners, right? It's not really their own money. I mean, when you get into like hundreds of millions of dollars of like fund sizes, they're definitely borrowing other people's money. And so in order to borrow other people's money, what are they actually doing? They're investing in private companies like ours, where like an asset class, right? We're a mutual fund or a cryptocurrency, an ETF, like NFT. We're an asset class too. We're a private company. And so a lot of the things you have to do to like raise capital for them is really have strong understanding of the financial part. And it's really hard to do, especially if you didn't study finance in undergrad, which I studied engineering. I didn't even take a basic accounting class. A lot of it is really complicated. So, you immediately go out and seek people, mentors, fractional CFOs you can hire by the hour to help you build a model, help you understand it, right? That part is definitely surprising. And also like market sizing, like for whatever reason, like I learned that when you're pitching our seed round, the very first time, like VCs spend a lot of time on markets, like much more than you think they would, right? They study markets, they have hypotheses of markets. How big is the market? How fast is it growing? What's the opportunity? Because ultimately, they made a bunch of promises to people they borrowed money from, right? They're going to give them $4 back for every dollar that they gave them in 10 years. That's the whole model. That's what all the stuff is being propped up by. So yeah, definitely learning about VCs and how they operate and how they think if you want to take that journey is a big part of it. I'm also happy to answer, Russell, if it's okay with you, I'm also happy to answer Chuck's question that came in about, do you pay your personal salary and benefits
sure.
or outside investment
You can answer
in your
quickly,
company? Yeah, is this discussed during investment discussions? Yeah, of course, you build an out years model, right? You build a model for the next 18 months or 24 months of how the company is going to operate with this money coming in. And you absolutely put yourself as getting paid. I mean, that's, if you're taking the money, you're absolutely doing it. Now, how much you're going to get paid and all that stuff. Usually the board usually decides the CEO's salary. They're responsible for that. You as a CEO, if you're the CEO, you decide everyone else's salary. And it's kind of like, that's the limitation of control from my perspective, right? Like I decide what everyone who works for me gets paid, but you can decide what I get paid and we can have that conversation. But yeah, absolutely. You definitely want to pay yourself. They expect you to pay yourself. You raise a couple $1 million. I mean, you're not going to pay yourself, $900,000, but you need to pay yourself enough to live, right, and survive for sure.
Awesome. Yeah. So, and then now a specific question for Sam. In preparing for the session, you said there are things you wished that you knew earlier about big companies versus startups. Can you share some of these things?
Yeah, sure. I think I kind of addressed that in the first question, but it was, I think the main thing is just the pace of movement. A bigger company just naturally moves slower than a startup can. And that's just a natural limitation of, just the beast itself. So that was the main thing. I had my suspicions before I joined, but yeah, it was mainly that. It's just the speed and then the risk that a big company can take. Obviously, if you have a bigger name and you have more at stake, you're less risk loving, and that's also just how it naturally works.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Winston, you're doing a social good setup, which is very unique and very important. Do you do any special preparation or testing before you decide to go full time?
Kind of no. My experience for starting this was my life experience, and I think most startups, I think especially the ones that are being really successful, that there's always a mission there. It's really hard to start a company or show up every day and work the hours necessary in the startup space without having a mission that you truly believe in. It could be that you really believe in DeFi, and so you're in the crypto space. I believe in equity and access, so I'm in the space of social good and finding and trying to build something for teachers of color. You could believe in finding care for children, and you start care.com. I think that mission underlies every great startup. And I think we wouldn't be building these companies if we didn't think there was a social good. Maybe in the long run that can be questioned, Facebook. But in the beginning, when we're building these things, we are all thinking that we want to change the world and we want to change it for the better. So I think no matter what space you're in, whether it's going to be in the public space and working in education, or if you're in the DeFi space, or you may be wanting to building a better Robinhood, you're thinking about, how can I change the world for the better? Because I've spotted something that does not work, and something I think that can be really accelerated and even shared with more people.
Yeah, a quote that I really love that Mike Troiano at G20 often talks about when he talks about branding is like, if you want to convince a whole bunch of people to like build a boat, don't like teach them about like lumber and nails and hammering, but like teach them to like yearn for the sea, right? Like yearn to get out there and explore the world, right? That's the mission that's driving people. It's like, how are you synthesizing that to get people excited about what you're doing, right? Because ultimately we're going to try to change the world with software or something else, right? And so have them yearn for the sea, not about hammering nails and cutting wood pieces.
One thing I also wish I had more of in the very early days of my own startup was a very healthy dose of skepticism, because I personally had a very bad experience with a potential investor who I'm very glad I didn't work with, and came out to be, someone who you didn't want to do business with. And being skeptical about people's motives is important, while also building trusting relationships with those who really keep showing up for you, adding value, demonstrating how they can do that. So going into every conversation with a little bit of skepticism, and remembering that you are in control of your destiny when it comes to the people that you work with. You can choose to work with someone or not work with someone. You can choose to take the term sheet or not. You can choose to negotiate or walk away. So be really skeptical, especially when it comes to people you are just meeting for the first time, because not everyone has great intentions, unfortunately. And I've been someone who's seen that. So be skeptical and trust that gut feeling. I forget who said it. Someone said something about either Winston or Vishal. I think trusting your gut is super important when making decisions about who you work with and who you hire.
Yeah, and I think, Russell, to end on this point, when you're talking about social good as well, it's also really hard when you're starting with a mission. It can be hard to pivot your mission into a story of profit. So a lot of folks will hear mission and they'll try to put you in the nonprofit space, or oh, that's very nice. That's great if you could do that. But being able to really craft your story about how does my mission transform into a company, and a profitable company that also does well. Now, you may know as the founder, like, look, I'm going to change the world, but there is a story that you need to tell the folks on the outside that they can so they can understand where you're going. So that's the part I say. And as a founder, I've been refining and changing and honing that story, because the folks on the outside are not in the trenches with you every day. They don't know your story. So being able to craft that story and share it, not just a 60-second pitch, but really saying things that stick and pull people into, not only is this company important, but this company is also going to be a company, a business.
Awesome. Yeah. Great words of wisdom. All right, we are coming close to the end. I have one more Q&A question, and then we'll wrap it up with one final thing. So from Greg, for panelists who started mid-career, what was the trigger point? How did you convince yourself to finally make that leap? Vishal, if you wanted to start this.
Yeah, I was working at a tech company. We were working on Link Squares nights and weekends, and my co-founder actually quit first and went full-time to talk to more customers during the day, while I was like helping build the product at night. And the moment was really around the traction we were getting, right? Validating that we're on the right path, and feeling like I was missing out. But then also all the things that Colleen said, like kind of doing the mental math. I'm like, well, how much cash do we have? How long can we survive? Like, can I not get paid for 2 years? Like, is this something that we're gonna do? And my wife now, my girlfriend at the time, she was like super supportive and like, hey, we'll figure it out, right? And that required like, well, we can't live in Southie anymore, even though we like love living here. We're gonna have to like make some lifestyle changes. And but it was really around feeling like I was missing out, and the company had a bright future that I should help kindle the fire, right? And kind of feeling that draw with the evidence that things were headed on the right path. And I think maybe, Sam talked about it. There's got to be a moment in your life where you just sail across the sea and burn the ship, and just you're in the new world. You're going to make it happen, right? No matter what, you're not going to go back, right? Even though you can always go back, but like if you want to be a founder, like at some point you just got to dive in. You got to dive in with 10 toes, like Winston said, right? There's a moment there where you examine as much as you can, and then you just do it, right? but you should do it at the right point in time.
Yeah, just building quickly off of that, having relentless confidence in yourself, no matter where you are in your career, is the key to going forward. Because if you aren't confident heading into an investor meeting, a client meeting, a development meeting, and you haven't prepared beforehand for all of those things, it's going to show. So building your confidence through preparation, through education, through networking, through surrounding yourself with really smart people, a great team, can help you as you build that confidence, no matter where you are in your career and how you get started with your startup.
So I switched completely mid-career, and I have a supportive family. So first, having that baseline set there, so you have that family of support. But I'll be honest, I was a terrible employee. I'm much better working for myself. And so I knew at some point I was going to build something that I had control of and that I could push forward. So I wasn't stuck in the middle and stuck in bureaucracy and having to wait either in the private sector where you're just pushing money around or in the public sector where you spend most of your time going out and just fundraising. I said, why wouldn't I just fundraise for a venture that I started? And I also sort of changed my mentality. I wasn't leaving one job for nothing. I was taking another job, but I was working for myself. So, I have my entire life to go and work for some company, and I felt I had a small window to build a company and a structure that I could be proud of and that I could chase and I could push forward. I can go back into the finance world or the nonprofit space at any time. It's certainly not going away. But the time that I have to build an incredible company is limited, and the energy I have to do it is limited. So the time is now. Why not strike? Why not take that chance, take that leap?
Just to top that off, one last thing is equity. I didn't have any equity where I was before. The most scarce resource you have is your time. So you can trade it for a salary, or you can trade it for something you really believe in the form of equity.
Awesome, thank you. And with that, we have about 3 minutes left. So I think we will end this here. I'd like to say thank you to all of our wonderful panelists, Colleen, Sam, Winston, and Vishal. You guys have given us amazing words of wisdom and things to look forward to and think about in our ventures and in our decisions that we make. And to everyone who came, thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys coming in, and always enjoy the rest of Startup Boston. There is so many more conversations and panels just like this one that you guys can join. And I think with that, we can end this.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.